Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm your host, Navid Moazzez, and warm welcome to the Branding Summit. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Scott Dinsmore. Scott is an entrepreneur and explorer who helps people build a career around work they love. He's the creator of two very successful online programs, Live Off Your Passion and How to Connect with Anyone. And he's also obsessed with people, adventure, life experiments, and learning. And I've just been following you from the very beginning since I started out online, and just amazed how much obviously your brand Live Your Legend has grown, and now you have the Live Your Legend local, and they are just kind of building your brand for you, like this community you've built. And that's what we're here to talk more about today, kind of obviously a little bit your personal brand, but also community building and how that can help kind of build your brand and business for you on autopilot simply. But it takes a lot of hard work to get there. But
Oh
first,
man.
warm welcome, Scott.
Well, thanks. I mean, it's an honor to be here. This is fun, and I know a lot has happened since we talked last, so it's fun to be
Yeah,
on
yeah, definitely, man. And just so much is going on. But I want to start a little bit from the beginning, because I know it wasn't always like this for you either, with all this meetups happening around the world at the same time. I saw a crazy video recently you posted, like
here.
people were partying, and it was just really inspiring to see. But
Oh,
in
cool.
terms of your personal brand, when did that all start? What was there a moment that you realized, okay, now I have to build more a personal brand online?
Yes, there was at a very specific moment I can think back on. It was in 2003. So what was that, 11 years ago? I was in a class at UC Santa Barbara in California where I went to school, and I had an entrepreneurial marketing teacher. His name was Jim Rouse, and he's still a good friend. And he gave us an article called, we did a class one day called "The Brand Called You" was the name of it. And it was an article by Tom Peters that was written way back before anyone was talking about personal branding. And you can still get it online. And it just totally changed my way of looking at kind of the way I approach my career and my life. Is like, I am the CEO of my own brand of Scott Dinsmore, which is like everyone's most important brand, to get that right. And so that set off a totally different set of decisions throughout, the next 10 years. That's had a lot to do with me deciding to eventually start a blog, mess around with it, kind of build some type of reputation around a certain idea and topic, and eventually led to Live Your Legend. But that whole concept of like, we need to totally own and manage our brand like it's the most important business we'll ever be a part of,
Hmm.
because it is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a long time ago. And I mean, I've read this article. It's a great article, and people should
Yeah.
definitely read it if they're interested in personal branding. But since then, a lot has happened for you as well. And Live Your Legend. I know your story, but for the people who don't know that, can you tell us a little bit how that started and the moment when kind of things started to take off for you?
Yeah, that certainly wasn't any type of an overnight success.
Yeah.
It So let's see. It started, I mean, pretty soon after finishing university. I had a really bad job out of college, and it was with a Fortune 500 company, the kind of thing you're supposed to be proud of. And I wasn't at all. It was miserable. And so I quit after 7 months, thinking, I actually quit with one goal in mind. I want to find something I can screw up. That's how I put it, because I was so angry. I wanted just to have an impact, like for my work to matter.
Yeah.
And there it didn't. It was just a waste of the company's time and money and my time. So anyway, I left trying to figure out what went wrong, and interviewed a bunch of people who were doing work that excited them and all this stuff. And eventually, one thing led to the next, and I started to write about it, started to have lunch with people, help them. It got to where like 80% of people would quit their jobs within a few months of having lunch with me. Like, it was crazy. But it wasn't because I had anything too magical. I would just ask them, why are you doing what you're doing? And generally they would respond with, well, because I'm supposed to. And when people do that, when they say those words out loud, it causes like kind of a trigger. And like, wait a second, that wasn't the right answer. Um, but what I did is I remember when I quit my job at that Fortune 500 company, I went to the bookstore, and the one really redeeming thing about the job is I had a long commute on a bus or on a train, so I could read books, and I read a ton of books, and all mainly personal development stuff. And I grabbed a book at the bookstore, and I would read like the first chapter of each of like 10 books at the store, and then pick the ones I wanted. And I found one that said you could start a website without knowing code. And it was called Internet Riches, of all names. Scott Fox is the author. He's
Yeah.
become a friend since. And um, but he insists the publisher was the one who pushed for that title. But either way, it was a really useful book, and it showed me that I could create this website. I don't know anything about code. I don't know anything technical. And so I did, and I used Yahoo Site Builder. It was hideous. I was so proud of it. And I created, it was called Reading for Your Success. And it was just about personal development books I had read and that I think could help people. And I would write summaries and recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that on the side, just as like my fun passion project. I would come home. I loved it. It was just so fun to explore, to try things out. And literally, like, it was just my wife and my parents reading it. Like, I had some friends who were subscribed. I think in total I had 112 subscribers or something.
Mm-hmm.
But they were all people I knew in the real world that weren't really paying attention. But that was my first experience with, like, kind of, well, into the online world, and then starting to build a brand around something that was like me. Like, people at least knew, like, okay, Scott cares about this. Like, if you want to, like, figure out what book to read, like, go talk to Scott. Like, he just knows about that stuff. And so I still didn't really know the brand I wanted to build at that point, but I just was building around what I was excited about right now, which I think is the only really thing you can build a brand around ever, is like for your personal brand, is like, what are you excited about now? So that went on for 4 years with no growth, no traction, no nothing. And then came Live Your Legend.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you were so consistent there. Most people would have given up. Imagine if you would have done that. Then
it's a scary thought.
Yeah, that's a really scary thought. 4 years is an extremely long time if you think in internet years. That's a lot of things happens. But then I know personally you met Corbett Barr, and he kind of helped you rebrand and kind of shape Live Your Legend. And how big was it at the time, when you met him? And then obviously we can talk a little bit about what impacted the growth the most.
Yeah, and there was actually really two core people. It was Corbett Barr and Leo Babauta of Zen Habits, who are both really good friends. Actually supposed to go wine tasting with them and their wives this weekend. Like, we stay very close. And but to rewind for a second, Reading for Your Success for 4 years didn't do anything, but it wasn't that frustrating because I wasn't measuring it based on how big is it growing. I was measuring it like, am I writing things? I'm excited to write these things and to share them. And it comes back to, like, that concept of an internal yardstick that Warren Buffett always talks about. Like, if he measured himself against all the other people in the investment world, he would probably have a heart attack and he would probably lose a bunch of money. But instead, he measures by his own standards. And that's not easy to do, but it's a really important thing. And so, if I was paying attention to subscribers, I mean, I would have given up within a few months because I got no new subscribers. But I was exploring, and I was building upon that. So that was a big thing. And then, but then I eventually, after 4 years, did start to get frustrated and thought, okay, and I don't know why, because I wasn't doing anything to try and grow it. I didn't try to learn about that or anything. Of course, most people who start their first website think it's just going to hit and everyone's going to see it.
Exactly.
That just doesn't happen. I'm sure it's happened once or twice, but it doesn't happen by the odds. And I was going to shut it down, and that's when I moved to San Francisco and started meeting people both online and in person. And the two pillar people were Leo and Corbett. And so Leo has Zen Habits, Corbett has Fizzle, and their online sites. And I remember being actually on a run with Leo. We would go on these long runs for a couple hours and just talk about ideas. And he was this big, like, mentor kind of idol of mine, and just became a really good friend. And he said one day, he's like, at the end of our run, we're stretching. He's like, hey, Scott, I hate to say it, but I think you're going to need to rebrand your site. And from Reading for Your Success, and I knew it. Like, I knew, like, kind of in the back of my mind, damn it, I probably should do like something like that. But you get so attached to the things that you do. And so I told him, like, you're totally right. And he kind of kicked me on it a couple times. And then at the same time, I was, trading ideas with Corbett. And then he was the one that actually did the nuts and bolts of redesigning, redeveloping, and building a specific brand with me, of the messaging and all that. He's great about the whole process, which is amazing, because most people know design, or they know code, or they know conversions or branding. But he has enough experience that he ties them all together, which is really exciting, because I just told you before we started the call that in a few days, we're launching the brand new Live Your Legend site, totally redesigned by Corbett and his design partner.
Chase Reeves.
Chase Reeves, yeah.
Oh, that's going to look amazing. I mean, we have to probably do another one next year, around that.
Oh, man. It's in the staging server right now. I'm so excited. So anyway, but this is a big thing. So when I launched Live Your Legend, it wasn't a shot in the dark. So I knew, based on the messing around I'd done for 4 years, what resonated with people. I knew that people wanted to meet with me to talk about their jobs that they didn't like. And I knew that I had had some impact on them. They had quit their jobs. They'd they'd gone on to other things they cared about. So while I wanted to talk about everything, I want to talk about travel and about, books and workouts and adventure, I knew that I needed to have one very specific thing that people came to me for, just because that's kind of branding 101. Like if you're known for everything, you're known for nothing.
Yeah.
And so I picked what's now become like the phrase, how to find and do work you love. And it was really just that focus on making a difference, doing work that mattered. Now, of course, now the beauty of it, and we can talk more about this, but once you nail a specific position or reason that people come to see you, you build trust and credibility in this, and then they start to want to hear about other things. So now I talk about travel. Like Chelsea and I, my wife and I, are going on a trip all next year where we'll talk a lot about travel. People love it. It's a big part of the Live Your Legend brand. So is exercise and fitness and health, but that's not why they come. So there's two different things. It's kind of subtle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that's what I love as well. Like today I believe you can write pretty much about all these topics, but from the very beginning you had a very specific focus. I assume like you wanted to help people, find work, do work they love essentially. And
right.
You also had this kind of, this live off your passion. I think there was a kind of an ebook, and you had some interviews there, and that was kind of the first main product you created after the rebrand with Corbett. There was that when things started to take off, and what had the biggest impact there that led you more to build up the audience and kind of get to more subscribers in your business.
That's right. And you asked about numbers. So so the numbers were, these are rough, but when I remember when I met these guys in San Francisco and online, and not just those two, but just this whole community of people who are doing this stuff, it totally changed my belief of what was possible. It was like my Roger Bannister moment when he broke the 4-minute mile, and all of a sudden a bunch of people did it. Their bodies didn't change, just their belief of what's possible did. So I got really excited. I also read a book called Inbound Marketing by Dharmesh Shah. And I'm not sure if it's been updated since then, but it was so good. It was just so simple, had checklists at the end of each chapter, and I just applied those. I love checking boxes and doing that stuff. So I did that with Reading for Your Success, and it grew to I think 3,500 subscribers once I really got focused on that. But then for 4 years, or 3.5 years, it had zero growth or whatever. So then when I rebranded to Live Your Legend, it was crazy. I didn't even expect this as part of the plan, but in the first week, the subscribers doubled to 7,000.
Wow.
And now that wasn't, there's always a lot of luck that comes into things, but I was very strategic, and I talked with Corbett a lot about this. How do we properly launch this and get this out to the world in a fun way? And so I did, this happens a lot now, but I think this was Corbett's idea in the beginning. He said, hey, go talk to a bunch of well-known people about a specific topic related to your brand. And so I asked people, what was the one moment that allowed you to discover your passion or purpose? And I interviewed like 57 people from, I don't know, Keith Ferrazzi, Simon Sinek, Seth Godin, and then, all kinds of folks. And I did that for two reasons. One is it was very specific to my brand. So I launched that as the launch post. And so it told people, this is what we're about. And here are a bunch of very influential people who are sharing their best stuff about it, which of course gives great value to the reader. It also builds credibility with me because of the association. And assuming I had good relationships with these people, which I'd like to think I did, and it wasn't just like straight out like, hey, just give me a quote, but like I'd known them for a while. A lot of them shared it, and I did guest posts on a number of sites. I spent a lot of time thinking about that. I wrote, I don't know, I'm not sure how many it was. Maybe it was 5 or 6 guest post articles on very specific sites. Like Zen Habits was a very big one, the biggest, and that made the biggest difference. And Jonathan Fields. So that's big. You don't just. A lot of people look at moments in time and attribute way too much success or results to that one thing. Like, oh, he launched his new brand, so he got 3,500 subscribers. That's just not right. That's not how it actually went down. And so that's why I encourage anyone who's looking at models that they know about in the industry, people they respect, they look up to, really understand not just how they live now, but what did they do to get there? What was their daily routine, and what was their launch plan, all that to become like the Leo Babauta. Like, don't model Leo today, model him when he, had his dead end job. He had a family of 6, now 8 he had to support. And he wrote 20 articles a week, 10 on his site, 10 on guest posts while he had a full-time job and had his full family. Like, understand that psychology and that process. not, what he's doing now, because that's just different. Same with Warren Buffett, anybody. So
Yeah, no, that's really great advice actually. And you shared kind of your launch plan there. Obviously, that takes a lot of planning. It's not just something you say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to rebrand, the next week I'm going to launch my website. This was probably a month of really strategic planning and like, okay, what sites am I going to write guest posts for? So I mean, even in this branding summit, I have a few specific interviews about this. So if people are going to implement a similar process for launching their brand, it can just go there, implement, like identify the sites they want to get on, and start maybe building relationships there, because it's not obviously Leo Babauta, it's very hard to get on his website, but if you have a
right.
relationship with someone like that, it's much easier. And then this thing you did with interviewing people, it's a little bit similar to like a summit, or doing like a roundup post or something like that, but
Yeah,
really
right.
getting it out there, right? And I think that's a really great tip for launching.
Well, what's funny is that Corbett, this was before he created his course, How to Start a Blog That Matters. And that course was pretty much what we walked through, and he built it into a course. And it's an awesome course. And now it's part of his physical community, which is even more incredible because it's even less expensive and has more stuff involved. But one of the items on it was to do that roundup post, which I think is great and still is a powerful thing. But it's funny now, I've seen, all kinds of them all over the place. And
You have to make them
still
stand out. I think that's the key, right? So you made an incredible roundup post, and obviously maybe it wasn't as many doing it at a time, but still, you even if you did something like that, interview people, maybe have that in the post. But did you make it as a video too, or just a quote, or just text?
I just did the quote and text, but I mean it, and again, just that wasn't what happened. So I spent, I mean, getting those quotes took probably a month, going back and forth to get all of them. I think there were 57, and so that takes time. But while you're doing that, it also builds a relationship with someone. And I had known them, most of them before that, maybe not closely, some of them closely, but part of it was like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Like you start with why. Like I built all of Live Your Legend based on Simon Sinek's Start With Why. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Yeah.
And I was so grateful to have met Jesse Jacobs, who owns Samovar Tea Lounge, this awesome tea spot in San Francisco. It's kind of the mecca for a bunch of entrepreneurs. I sat with him and he said, hey, have you ever heard of Simon Sinek? Because that guy's a big fan of Samovar. I said, no. He's like, all right, go home right now and watch his TEDx, his TEDx talk, which is one of the number one talks on TED. I think it's number 3 of all TED Talks. And I watched it right when I was about to rebrand Live Your Legend. The timing was perfect. I watched it once, twice, 3 times. I've now seen it probably over 20 times. And it is so powerful. So everything I've done at Live Your Legend, I've tried to really start with why. Like, it's not just about doing work you love. It's about how can the world change when you do work you love? How will you treat your wife, your kids, the people around you? How much more innovation can we have? That's why we're doing this. And people can relate to that. That's why we have, 150 plus meetup groups around the world. It's not for Scott Dinsmore. It's not even for Live Your Legend. It's just because they all believe the same thing, that we should do something that matters.
Yeah.
So the Start With Why thing was huge, and that was a tangent, but an important one I wanted to get to later, and we can get back into it. But the launch post, like when I published that, I sent individual emails to every single person. They weren't forum emails. It was like specific to them. And sure, there was some text that I used in all of them because it was related to this launch or whatever. But it wasn't like a mass blind copy, like, hey, it's live, I'd love for you to share it. It was very different than that. And the same thing when my TEDx went live. It did not just go live and I said, hey guys, watch it. I spent 3 or 4 days, 8 hours a day, sending things out to people in a very non-sales way. It was like, I remember telling him for that, I said, hey, this went live. I think it could be really helpful. I'm really proud of it. If you think it could be helpful for your community, I'd be honored if you share it. I said, but do not share it because you're my friend. Share it because you think it would help your community. If it won't, then don't share it. And that was that's always the kind of route I try and take. And that's, you always want to lead with helping, right? And so that was like the launch of Live Your Legend. So it wasn't just I published this launch.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we got that right. I think it's a lot of good things came out of this. But then obviously you had an audience. You had about 7,000 some subscribers, and that's great. Did you have a product already at that point, or when did that like? I think there's the distinction between having an audience and having a community. I think the community just obviously that's the bigger thing. An audience, a lot of people have an audience online, but that doesn't mean they have a community that just talk about you everywhere like you have. And also Nerd Fitness does a fantastic job with that, Steve Camp.
And I've taken a lot of notes from Steve Kang, because he was doing really well with this stuff, long before I was working on it. And I even have a set of notes he shared with me about community building. It was like, I don't know, maybe like this long on like a notepad on my computer, and I would pull it up every week and review it to make sure I was like following a number of the things. And now I haven't looked at it for a while because we've kind of gotten to our movement. But anyway, Steve was really helpful. And let's see. So in terms of the product, there wasn't a product then. And actually, one quick thing before we move to the product thing is about the launch. Yeah, it can be really big and be really involved. I mean, I have a 7-page launch checklist that I use for like products. I really want to hit all the points. But on the other side of it, like we launched a workshop last week where the 2 days before I didn't think I was going to launch it. And then I just wrote the sales page in a day and launched it. And so it's not, if you want to really get the most out of something, you want to build it up, you want to share it with people, build up the plan. But the big risk there is that a lot of people will see that and be like, screw that, I'm not even going to do anything. And that's the worst thing, is that you don't do anything. So if the launch idea is like scaring you, don't want to do it. I mean, think of what are the 80-20 things you could do, or the 90-10 things, the few things that'll make a big difference. But get your stuff out there sooner rather than later, because if it's not out there, you can't learn from others and you can't build the brand. So like Reading for Your Success didn't go anywhere, but for 4 years it taught me what I wanted to focus on. It allowed me to learn. And so it's a big part of the process that no one really likes to focus on. They're like, oh, live your legend, but no, it was a build-up of 4 years. So
yeah.
That's
I mean, I think a lot of people can resonate, if they're, been struggling, they watch someone like John Lee Dumas, who built his business in just, 1 year. But, that it's not only that. He had the relationships in place pretty much before he started. He had, it was, even though he didn't enjoy his career previously, he was very successful. He was making 6 figures. He was doing all the great things, and then he started. He was very disciplined, and a lot of people, they see only his podcast. Let's do a 7-day podcast and replicate his success. It's not possible. Most likely you're going to fail if you do that. So maybe find something that works for you, and maybe stick to the plan for a bit longer, and you will see more success.
Yeah, and Dumas wasn't an overnight success either. And I was with him a couple nights ago in San Francisco, and like you hear him when he gives his talks, like, yeah, he's done incredibly well, incredibly fast, and makes a ton of money, which is hard to believe how much money he brings in. But there were years of frustration, of idleness, where he was just working a job he didn't like, and thinking about it. So that's all part of the process that, again, model how they got there, not who they are today, so.
Yeah, no, completely agree.
We can dive into the product thing now if you want.
Yeah, definitely the product and how that kind of built more of a community, because you didn't have a community, so to speak, when you kind of rebranded. I mean, that was a pretty nice audience, to have 7,500. You can still make a full-time living off something like that. That's totally possible, obviously.
Yeah.
But how was that, and then turning it to what it is today from there with products and everything you have going on?
Yeah, well, what's funny is that, yeah, you could make a full-time living off of it. I wasn't making hardly any money at that point. I don't remember the numbers, but I do remember in my mind thinking, when I first started out online, I'm like, God, it would be so incredible to have 1,000 subscribers. I'm like, I'd see people who've had that. I'm like, that's when you've made it. And then I got to 1,000 and nothing changed. I'm like, wait, there's just more people, which is great, but there's no, money, no nothing. And then I'm like, no, 10,000 is the number. And I remember hitting 10,000 subscribers and nothing was different. I'm like, yeah, was more, excitement and community stuff, but like there wasn't really any money coming in. But there's a very good reason why. I had nothing for sale. Like,
yes,
nothing,
yeah.
And it sounds so simple, but and we're doing a workshop on this in a couple of days, how to make your first $1,000 from your passions and talents. I could give it in one slide, and it's put a price on something that you're good at, and someone will pay you for it. Like, but most people go years never even asking or even never even offering the service for a price. So it and I had offered coaching previously, and so that's where some of the money had come in, and that's where I first had that aha moment. But I remember the real light bulb went off. Well, it was 2 things. One is I published a post. It was an Ask the Reader post, and it was, what is the biggest challenge or fear keeping you from doing work you love, or something like that. And you can still find it on my site. And I got like 350 comments on that. And I would usually get like 30 comments on something, and or maybe even less. And it just blew up, and people were just pouring their hearts out on the page. And I was in, I think I was in Italy with my family on this trip, just with like my sister and her kids and my parents and stuff and my wife. And I got an email from Corbett, and he said, "Hey dude, I see this Ask the Reader. It's totally blown up." He's like, "You need to create a product." And he's like, "When you see that demand, you need to create something." And I don't know the timeline. It was either soon after that or a little bit before. I was also on a run with Leo, and he's like, "Dude, why don't you have a product yet?" He's like, "Just create an ebook." And he started really putting the screws in me. He's like, "Create an ebook. Don't overthink it. Like, keep it really small and simple. You can do it in a day, but just so you have something out there you can build upon." And of course, it took me months to actually do it.
Yeah.
And then when I did it, it started out, as an idea this big, and it turned into Live Off Your Passion, which is a much bigger thing, which I'm glad it did, because I think it had a much better value proposition.
Sure.
And now that's grown. We've since redone Live Off Your Passion probably a dozen times. Now it's on its own website and membership and things like that. But it came from the demand from the community, and based on my very specific, what do they call it? Like the technical term, unique selling proposition or whatever. Why come to live your legend? So it wasn't some like offshoot, like, I don't know, like how to travel the world or whatever other things I was excited about. It was very specific.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I mean, you mentioned like your audience or community. You're starting to build a community essentially, and this blew up, this survey or whatever you asked the reader you had on your site. And I mean, you essentially used your community to as feedback to build this product, which is very powerful, I think. And maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but now obviously you know that that's the way to do it.
And actually, I did know it because that was what I spent a good part of my career doing before I launched the website stuff. And actually, my dad was in business in software before like the internet, and he kind of indoctrinated me into this process. He and a mentor and friend of his and also mine, Frank Robinson, this process that they call it synchronous development, but it's building a product alongside your customer and having them lead the product development. So instead of the usual process is design it, build it, and then sell it. But now you reverse the whole thing. You sell it first, and then you design it, then you build it. So you're 100% confident that what you're designing and building is what people want to buy, often because they've already even paid you for it. And this isn't like a tricky thing. You tell people up front, like if you're going to do that. And this is how I've developed all of our products since then. But it is just crazy to think that any one of us know what our audience needs better than they know. Now, they might not be able to articulate it in like a product or a course, but they can tell you that I have panic attacks because I hate my job, and I come home and I'm so rude to my wife because I can't stand it. That you can feel, and you can realize, okay, we need to help with them with that. How we offer it is a different story. And that's where the entrepreneur and the business person gets creative, but it needs to start with them. And when it does, then you build something that they ask for. You can even position it, brand it, and word it in a way that is their words, because it's what you've seen. I mean, I saw, I had hundreds of responses to this Ask the Reader post in the comments. But then, so I followed up with a survey and then got probably another 500 responses. And I categorized them all into an Excel spreadsheet. And I found, I think it was 8 things that everybody said. It was like, I can't just quit. Or, I have a family to support. I don't know what path to choose. What if it's the wrong decision? It was these exact same things everyone was saying. So that's what every module became. It was like, okay, like the, module 5 is like how to choose the right path to make sure you don't regret it or whatever. It was like the exact thing. And the same thing happened with our Connect with Anyone course. And because I think as soon as you think you're able to figure out all the answers for your community, it should be a red flag. Like, wow, I need to get back out and interact with them. I need to ask them what's going on and talk with them. And we used to talk with people face to face. We'd go in their homes and watch them use their product. And this was before I did my online stuff, when I was working in other businesses. So sell, design, build. That's it. Either sell it actually and get a sale with money, or sell the idea to them and see their reaction and get them to fuel it. And because, I mean, and then when you launch it, it's so fun because when you launch it, your odds of success are almost 100% because the very worst thing that could happen is you find out it's not a fit right in the beginning and you just stop before you've invested anything in building the course, which is, that's a victory in itself.
Yeah, very powerful. I mean, you focused on building the audience first, even though you had 7,500 subscribers. You just kept like providing ton of value to them, and then eventually, kind of maybe it took a little bit longer than it could have, but still you had about 10,000. Then you launched this product. Well, is that correct? And then that was a big success for you. I know that kind of spread around. A lot of people took that course or bought the ebook.
I want to think it was at 10,000 subscribers when it went live, because I remember saying, when I get to 10,000, like that'll be, the time, and and it just wasn't. Nothing changed. But I think it probably would have made sense to make a product much earlier. I do think you want to build your audience first, because then you can know what they actually need.
Sure.
Now, there are other ways without having an online audience. You can, my first interaction with my audience was having lunch with friends who had jobs they didn't like. So it was building, getting feedback, all that stuff in the beginning. But yeah, so it was easy though to continue to work on building the audience. I figured out how you did that. You wrote guest posts, you built these toolkits, do these different things that were really valuable for people. And it was, I guess, simple. So I saw it as easy. Like, it's not easy to build a 7,000 person email list, but there was a process that I was able to follow after I kind of experimented. And that was way less scary than thinking, oh my God, I'm going to offer something for sale. And so I put it off for a long time, longer than I should have. And then when I decided, I'm like, all right, I need to switch from trying to build the audience to trying to build a business around what we have here. And that's when Live Off Your Passion came, within a few months. And when we launched it, the first month, I remember the first day I launched it, and like the first hour, and I'm not going to get the numbers exactly right, but the first hour was like a couple $1,000s or something. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, like what?
Feels amazing, right?
It was crazy because I'd never been paid for like something I had created myself. And then I went for a workout and came back, and like another $2,000 had come in or something. And by the end of the month, it had done, I think, $31,000. And I was so blown away. And that was another Roger Bannister moment for me. It was like, okay, like this is what it's like. This is how you go about this. Like, this is what I had been missing. And then I've, since built off of that. But that also didn't happen. That was not $31,000 in a month. It was more like $31,000 in, 5 years, because it was like learning the process.
Yeah, and then it's not that much. If you calculate how much time you actually spend, obviously now it pays off way more when you do launches, stuff like that. So it will pay off, but you put up the work up front essentially. But there's you had an audience there, and that's a lot of strategy, guest blogging. You can do these roundup posts, you can do different things to grow your audience essentially, and obviously you have to define it, and that's what you did when you did the rebrand there a little bit as well. But there's a distinction, as I said, between audience and community. So what's your take on this? Like, okay, you have an audience, but that doesn't mean you have a community automatically, even though they are related.
Yeah, and I think that has become our big point of difference there's a lot of, like passion blogs out there and like, oh, like do work you love, whatever. But we focus on the foundation is community and your surroundings. So the belief is that what we've realized is the fastest way to do the things you don't think can be done are to hang around people already doing them. And so it's not just, Live Your Legend isn't just how to find and do work you love. It's how to find and do work you love by surrounding yourself with the people who make it possible. And what I've found is there was a point where I noticed a lot of people were emailing me saying, Scott, I have, your tools have been helpful and I really appreciate them. I've loved your articles, whatever, but how do I deal with these people who don't support me? Like, I don't have these people around me who like share my same, beliefs and like support and encourage me. Like, that I want to surround myself with these excited, inspiring people, these leaders, whatever. How do you do that? And I heard it from literally like over 1,000 people. And that's what became our Connect with Anyone course. And I don't know if I think the name How to Connect with Anyone probably isn't the best. We do teach people how to build genuine connections with whoever they want, but it's really how to surround yourself with the people who refuse to let you fail. And I've noticed that in this online world of unbelievable things like that, we're able to do this across the planet, live on Skype. It's very cool. Yeah. We have Facebook with all these connections and friends, but the problem is a lot of people think those are real friends and they're not. But it checks a box in your mind thinking, I kind of am doing the friend thing, but it doesn't. It doesn't fire the different chemicals in your brain that get fired when you sit face to face with someone, when you hug somebody, when you work out with somebody and share an idea. And I think that's just getting destroyed. Like, our genuine connections are getting destroyed by these online tools because they're being used the wrong way. They can be used for good, and if you do that, then it can be unbelievable. So I noticed that and I thought, we're in the center of this kind of global connection and belonging crisis, and we need to do something about that. And so that, I think, with the community thing, that's why it's so different than an audience. I mean, a community are people who want to be around each other, who share the same common beliefs. They don't come just to like pay attention to someone. They come because they want to be a part of something real. And so that comes back to the Simon Sinek start with why. You build a community based on a common why, a shared set of beliefs and visions that people can align with, and that's what then led to Live Your Legend Local, which are these local in-person communities around the world. And right now we have 150 of them in 48 countries, 150 cities. They're growing each day. We just got a few applications this morning from one actually in Stockholm, another one in Tel Aviv, and just, I don't know, they're just popping up all over the place. One of our most dedicated, passionate groups is in Kuwait City in Kuwait. They have their own Instagram account. That's Live Your Legend Local Kuwait. And Kenya as well. And there's this picture of Ben, who's the leader in Kisumu, Kenya. He had 35 people in rural Kenya with a huge poster about the size of my wall over here in my apartment that was painted Live Your Legend Local. And they were all holding it up for a picture. And it gives me chills every time I see it. And it's part of that video that you saw of us all meeting up around the world. But there's no way they would have held up that poster if it said Scott Dinsmore on it, and it isn't because that's not what it's about. It's just they did it because no matter what religion you are, no matter what culture you're from, where in the world, people want to feel like their life meant something, like that. And in simpler terms, now that comes down to work, it comes down to all kinds of things. Anyway, that is what we've rallied behind, and that's why that has been as successful as it is. And I thank Simon Sinek every time we're emailing or whatever, like, hey, dude, just so you know, like, it all started with why. And he's like, thanks, man. But anyway.
No, man, that's so cool, really, everything you built there. But for personal brand purposes, obviously you have a strong personal brand. You can get invited to speak. You did a TEDx talk, but as you said, maybe they wouldn't hold up, Scott Dinsmore. It's like the community. Let's say, if you give some tips for the audience here, if they want to build more of a community for their brand, and they have maybe even a personal branding site, like for example, me, I have navidmoazzez.com, but I can like build something around my podcast or something else, with a different name, so they can kind of align with that and feel like they belong to something, which is harder to belong to a person. That's the essence of it, to build a community. Like Nerd Fitness, they're like, they have this like nerds, they're playing video games and they have the fitness, they want to get fit and they want to do all these things. And same with you, they want to do work they love, they want to meet inspiring people, and like, so they kind of get them. That's kind of what I feel it's all about, meeting the people you surround yourself with around the world in a local setting.
And what's beautiful about that, and it's funny, like Nerd Fitness, I think I recently saw on his Instagram, someone got a Nerd Fitness tattoo, and like, it's crazy, but like that, because they so much identify with what that stands for. And so there's kind of two ways when it comes to branding. A lot of people will take the route of like the scottdinsmore.com route or whatever, where it's your name. And then, there's like the liveyourlegend.net type route where it's like based around a vision or whatever. Now, no matter what, I think you want to make sure you build in that why and that vision and purpose, even if it's around your name. Like, if you have your name, you could still have a slogan, that you stand for, or still like have some type of a brand around that you stand for. And now I'm not saying that you can't just do it with your name. I think it becomes a lot harder. I think you're going to be a lot harder pressed for people to really go to bat for your cause if it's just like the Scott Dinsmore show.
No, whatever, definitely. Unless, the same with, someone like I feel like Lewis House, he has, for example, the School of Greatness. People can
Exactly.
align with that. And that's a great name for what he's doing with greatness. And now, like, okay, Tim Ferriss has the 4 Hour Work, 4 Hour brand, and but
Right.
he recently started a podcast, which is the Tim Ferriss show. But he has such a big brand, so people
Exactly.
still will tune in and to follow his message. He still built this up over many years.
And keep in mind that he is an anomaly.
Yeah,
He's amazing and he's done
sure,
unbelievable things, but he is not the norm.
exactly.
So and most of the people we pay attention to aren't the norm. And it's just like people like with naming in general, like with products and stuff, people like will look at like Apple and be like, see, like, the name can be whatever. It's like, yeah, but Apple spent decades getting people to identify with that brand, that cult, and they've done an incredible job with it. But like, if you're starting today in a crowded marketplace, like, you probably want your name to stand for something a little bit more than just a fruit, unless you want to have a real story behind it, whatever. You can do whatever you want, but like, you want to think of how can you stack the deck in your favor, because most of the stuff is totally out of your control. So the few things that are, like, do something about it, And that was the same thing like when I gave the TEDx talk. I knew that 90% of things were out of my control. What I could do is I could give the best talk I was capable of, and then I could do everything in my power to get it in front of the people that I thought I could help. That was it. Everything else is like, who knows what TEDx would do, what TED would do with it. And so that's why I spent days doing specific emails to different people and all this kind of stuff, and not to mention the build up. And we talk about, I've written articles about all this, which you can point people to. But when it comes to also just like the personal brand thing, like, in order to, I think, to help build the brand of, let's say, an idea, like like Lewis's School of Greatness, his Lewis House brand has helped build that. He's done a great job of building his personal brand. And so you want to do that no matter what. And so there's a few really simple ways to do that. I mean, one is you obviously want to have something that's simple, that's high quality, incredible on the internet. So when people Google you, they find you something other than some random Facebook pictures. Like, you have a website, even if it's just one page, it's very simple. It says what you believe in and a few quotes from people or something like that. A few testimonials, and then you go and speak some places, and you'd be surprised, but you can get speaking gigs a lot of places. Maybe they're not well-known ones, but that's fine in the beginning, because one, you want to get comfortable, but also you leverage that speaking gig to speak somewhere else, and then hopefully you do it for free and get it on video as like a payment, and then get a testimonial, and then you can speak somewhere else, and you ladder that up, and that can build your brand. This stuff is very accessible for people who are willing to do it, but it's a scary thing when people hear probably me say this, like, oh, go speak somewhere. They're like, oh my God, I'm not qualified or talented to speak. And that's almost certain not to be true. Like, if you're an adult or have been around for more than, let's say, 20 years on this earth, like, there's probably something, I'm almost sure, something that you can offer other people that they will gladly pay you for and thank you for. But you have to just find find what that thing is for you, and then find the type of person who's in need of it. But that's where the real work comes in. And I know we love telling ourselves that, like, I'm not enough, I shouldn't be on stage, I don't belong there. And I'll even find myself saying that kind of crap sometimes if I'm not in the most resourceful place.
Yeah.
But it's not true if you find the right person. And all you need to do is find one person who needs that, or one small group who wants to hear you talk about that one thing. And then, of course, you have your hook, whatever it is. Like, if you, I don't know, ran a marathon in Africa or whatever, that's more of an extreme example, but there's all kinds of things, legitimate, real things to build into your story that then help sell your brand,
Yeah. I mean, I want to take it back a little bit to, obviously we talked about going like from audience to the community, which you did. Like, how big were you, kind of your audience at the time when you realized, okay, now it's time to kind of, start these like local communities up? It was quite big at the time, right?
Let's see. What was it?
If you remember.
The first one was mid or early 2013, I think.
Okay.
And
it's about a year ago, a little longer, a little more than a year ago.
No, it was more like a year and a half,
Okay.
or possibly a little bit more. But what happened was, so I don't remember what the size of the audience was then, but I mean, it could have been like 20,000 or 15 or 20,000 people or something. Okay. Which was, I mean, it's still hard for me to believe, like, those are real numbers, like, those are real people. And sometimes people get like we get lost in that. Oh, like I've heard people say this, like I only have 1,400 subscribers. I'm like, do you realize every one of those is a person that you actually like, whose life you could change? And if you did, they'll go on to change other lives. Like we get so caught up in all these big numbers. It's like, if you change the life of 1, 2, 3, 10 people, like, and that's all you ever did, like that will be felt for a long time. So anyway, it's an aside, but the first event, I did one in San Francisco that was just like a Live Your Legend event. It wasn't like any thought of Live Your Legend local or meetups or whatever. But then a girl or two women, Naz and Leah from our Connect with Anyone course out in Australia said, we want to host an event in Sydney, a Live Your Legend event. I said, oh, that sounds cool. And I was thinking, wait, are they wanting me to come out there or what? And they're like, no, like we're just going to do it if you don't mind. I'm like, no, that's cool. And so I sent an email out to our Sydney group, and they had like 30 people at an event, and they did an awesome job with it. And it was so surreal to see happen. Like, wow, a Live Your Legend event where I'm not there, other side of the world. And they ended up then, someone in London, Yaron, also did the same thing in London, and he started a group there. And then these guys worked together, the girls and Naz and Leah in Australia. One of them was an event planner and in the past, and she knew events really well. She created like what we call a field kit. It was like how to run an event, what the agenda was, and they actually pretty much wrote it for me because they knew better than I did. I'm not good with events like as my personal strength. But then we used that and we launched that to some other people, and some other people started to host events. And then it wasn't until late last year where I decided, let's do one event all on the same day. And of course, in Scott Dinsmore style, I had no idea what was involved in orchestrating that. And it was a tremendous project. And I think it was about this time last year, early November, where I said, let's do it. I announced it on the site, and I said, who wants to be a host? And I put out an Aweber form just for them to fill out. And we had over 400 people fill it out. And to be a host, not to be an attendee, to like host an event. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is crazy. And I was overwhelmed and thought, wow, wait, we need to get serious about this. And so we ended up creating a 6-page contract for them to sign to make sure that they believed in the same values that we did, to make sure they were going to host a respectable event. And it was pretty self-selecting. Like if you wouldn't sign it, you weren't meant for the group anyway. And it's not like it was legally binding technically, but I mean, we're not going to like actually hold someone to it like that. It's more like, do you share the same beliefs? I sent that out to people, and I'm like, okay, a few people are going to sign this. We had like 225 people sign this 6-page agreement. Wow. I'm like, oh my God, like, okay, this is real. And so then we went, and went through this huge mess of organization to make it happen. But when we did it, I would encourage you to put a link to our little video of these meetups we had.
Definitely, yeah.
150 on the same day in 48 countries, and we had everyone do a dance to what it meant to do work they love. And so we have this kind of dance montage. Yeah. But anyway, that all came back to people sharing in that belief. And what's fun, and this is a big thing about these meetups, you talked about how it spreads your brand kind of on autopilot. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's nice that it gets the Live Your Legend name out there. That's very cool. In terms of spreading my personal brand as Scott Dinsmore, that's yet to be decided, because like I was actually at a San Francisco event a few months ago, and I was welcoming people, and I introduced myself, and I said, hey, welcome. What's your name? And she's like, oh, my name's Claire. That wasn't the name, but let's say she said Claire. Oh, my name's Claire. She's like, oh, and what's your name? And I said, oh, I'm Scott. And she's like, I'm like, have you ever been to one of these? She's like, no, it's the first time. And she's like, what about you? Have you ever come to one of these? And I'm like, yeah, I've been to a few. And then I stood up and gave my introduction, and she kind of felt silly, but that's the point. Like, I want it to be like that. She came because a friend on Facebook posted that she's going to a meetup to help do work you love. And this girl's like, I have to be there because I don't like my job. So a lot of these people don't know who I am, and that's totally fine. But they share the beliefs. And what I realized, though, is that I was the bottleneck for so long, and I still am, but like much less so now. Everything was going through me. Like, to hold a meetup, like I would do it, and I would hold one once a year or something. Yeah. But these people wanted to do something. And so I was thinking, how can I pull myself out of the equation so that they can just have at it? Because we have this incredibly talented community. People are awesomely resourceful and creative and clever. Everyone is, if you give them permission. And so that's what we did. I stepped out as the bottleneck, and instead of being able to host one event, we could host hundreds. And that's been the beautiful thing. And these are totally free. It's a non-commercial thing. It's a huge investment on our part for time and money with our team. But I just think it's the right thing to do. And when people go there, when I interview like our audience, they say this is the best thing that I've done in like the last year. Like the best thing you've done at Live Your Legend has been these in-person groups. I met my business partner. I found my best friend. I finally wrote my book. Like all these things, we don't teach people how to write books, you know? We just provide an environment where people feel empowered to do things they care about. So that's beautiful. And so it's a very win-win, two-way, three-way street type of thing. This
is like, I saw this video. I'm definitely gonna link that up and show people that in the audience here, because it's just amazing how you can build a community that obviously they don't know your brand, but some people, they don't know the Scott Dinsmore brand. Especially if someone else sends a link to a meetup and they might not have heard about your site even. They just, this meetup sounds cool, I want to go check it out. So it's very common. But if it was the Scott Dinsmore meetup group, it just makes sense that it would be a little bit harder maybe to bring people together. Live Your Legend is also a very obviously good name, since people want to do that. It's kind of resonates with people, I think, too. So, and that's, it comes back to building this loyal following. Like they are kind of, you have like this cult following around kind of the Live Your Legend brand. It just kind of, obviously they want to host the meetups. They want to do all these things. And I think that comes also back to, me, I've been following you for quite some time, and the content you provide, it's kind of evergreen content you have on your website. You post it on so many different sites. It's kind of leading up to this, it's not just, now that you have people all over the world, like hosting meetups for essentially your brand and like living this message you believe in.
Yeah, and that, that's, I'm glad you brought that up, because, it's like Live Your Legend, it's 95% free, just like I think a lot of blogs are, and websites. It started as a blog. Now we have, a lot of different things going on. It's a full-blown business that I couldn't have imagined. But in today's world, I think you're very hard-pressed to be able to build any type of a business, a movement, a community, or whatever, if you don't start by offering value. If you build that trust by showing people you actually care, and you're not just writing posts because you think they're going to get shared, or you think they're like link bait or whatever, that just stuff doesn't work. I think to date, I've had one article I've written that has gone like viral. And I know all kinds of people that have all kinds of things that have gone, super viral and stuff. Now I'm grateful the one piece of content that really has caught on has been my TEDx talk. Again, there's a lot of things that went into that, but that has totally changed the game. And that's a big branding thing too, because when you're associated with the TEDx brand or the TED brand, that gives you a lot of credibility. Well, I think it's fascinating that TED has done an amazing job with their branding. And I was talking with Kelly Stetzel, the content director, recently about this, who picks all the made TED speakers. So they have TEDx. There's thousands of TEDx's around the world. It's amazing. And we've used them as one of our models for Live Your Legend Local. That and Toastmasters, because our vision is that, like Toastmasters has clubs all over the world for public speaking, they have like 14,000 clubs or something crazy. We want to have that in every city around the world, an in-person community to encourage you to do work you love and have people who support you. That's the big vision, the 30-year vision. But with Kelly, with what we talked about with TED, is that this TEDx thing, most people don't realize TEDx is not TED. Like giving a TEDx talk is not giving a TED talk. It's incredibly different. Like it's pretty much impossible to give a TED talk. You can do it, but it's a harder application process than anything. But 95% of the world thinks that I gave a TED talk. I didn't. I gave a TEDx talk in San Francisco in front of 150 people at a museum. It was awesome. It was unbelievable. But I think TED did this on purpose. They're very clear that it's an independently organized event, but they also know that people make snap judgments. They see the TED logo and they see the TED logo and they think they're the same thing. So it's a brilliant branding thing. TED has allowed their brand to grow on steroids because of it, yet maintained, the quality and all that kind of thing, which is a clever way to go about it. And it's very similar to the Live Your Legend Local, I guess, approach just because I copied it. I mean, I'm
Oh
trying
wow, this is
from
so this man, this is so smart actually. This is a great approach. I mean, really, I mean that just spreads. I mean, I knew about the TED and TEDx is different. Obviously, it's so hard. I think Simon Sinek he gave a TED talk, right?
No, well, that's the amazing thing. Simon
Ah,
Sinek didn't even give a TED talk. He gave
ah,
a TEDx talk at Puget Sound to like a room of like 50 people, and and even the audio is terrible, and so is the video. But his message is so good that it now has become, I think, the number 3 talk on all of TED. So TED now features it on their site. But if you look at it, it says TEDx Puget Sound. And now he's given it. He just recently gave a TED talk on the TED stage, but that hasn't done nearly as well as his Start with Why talk. And so that's another beautiful thing, is that you have the chance to for that extra exposure.
yeah.
But either way, it's still related to a brand that represents credibility, which is
So it's maybe not as hard as people think to kind of apply, especially if they have that in their local city. If they want to, I mean, that's a little tangent, but if they want to give a TEDx talk or something like that, that's probably easier than you think, than if you have a strong message to deliver.
And that's a great point, because and that is, I mean, if you were going to focus on one thing to build your brand, it would be to figure out, like, the 1-80-20 thing is probably to figure out how to give a TEDx talk somewhere, and realize that they're happening. I mean, there's multiple talks happening every day, TEDx talks, like live events happening around the world. I forget the stats. It's crazy. There's a lot of them. But what was amazing, so for mine, is an important thing to remember with any time you're looking to get exposure or whatever. I had a dream of giving a TED-related talk, a TEDx whatever talk, sometime in my life. And I wasn't working at it specifically then, a year or two ago, or no, 3 years ago, because I just thought, I'm not ready yet, whatever. And then one thing led to the next, where I heard about this talk in San Francisco. They already had all their speakers lined up, and they and someone, a reader actually said, "Scott, are you speaking at this talk?" And it was about the pursuit of passion was the title of the event. I'm like, damn it, like, how did I miss this? And it turned out I knew somebody in town who knew the organizer, and they introduced me. And they're like, "Do you want me to introduce you?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." But they already have all their speakers. They picked them, 6-9 months ago. But anyway, I introduced to him. And he said, "Oh, Scott, I wish I would have known about your work. We would have had you at this talk." And I'm like, damn it, I missed my opportunity. He's like, "But we'd love to have you as a guest." I'm like, "Yeah, of course. Like, I definitely want to come." Then, and then he looked at some of my stuff and whatever. And then 8 days before something, I get an email and it says, "Hey, Scott, would you be willing to be or we had someone cancel, one of the speakers cancel. Would you be willing to be a stand-in?" He's like, "We already have someone to stand in for this person, but we need a secondary alternate in case something else happens." And I said, "Whoa," like, I'm like, we were launching Connect with Anyone within 2 days of the TEDx talk. I'm like, and it was in like a week. And, most people have 9 months to prepare for a TEDx talk. And they get all this speaker training and stuff. And I said, I'm like, "Man, what are the odds I would speak?" He's like, "Probably 10%, but you'd have to prepare as if you're going to give the talk." And I told him, like, "I'm honored, but I can't commit to that." I'm like, "I have this huge launch. It would crush me." And he's like, "I can respect that. Okay." He writes me 2 days later and says, "Scott, we had someone else bail out. If you say yes, you're 100% going to give a talk." And when I heard that, I thought, you know what? Talk about the perfect storm. Like, this is the worst timing, but maybe it's the best timing. I'm like, okay, I can't turn this down. Yes, let's do it. I had 6 days to prepare, which I'm thankful for, because if I had 9 months, I would have spent every second of 9 months preparing. And like Parkinson's law. But anyway, I gave this talk, and I was the first one during the day to give the talk, and it was amazing. It was awesome. It was terrifying. It was all this stuff. But afterwards, I remember going up and thanking the organizers, and they said, "Hey, thank you so much. We were in such a lurch. Like, this person left us hanging last minute. We needed someone to fill the spot, and your talk and your topic was perfect." And I looked at them, I thought, oh my God, like, they're as grateful that I showed up as I am that they invited me. And that is the case with anything. If you have value to offer, there is a writer at Forbes magazine who is waiting for the next best story. If you can provide it to them, they will gladly publish it and thank you for it. So it's on you to find that right connection. So it's not about handouts. It's about find that TEDx or that whatever that is on the topic that you can nail. And then they will thank you for it. And I came back to the talk a year later. I remember now that the talk had, gotten millions of views, and I said again to the organizers, and they held it the next year again. I came as a spectator, And I said, hey guys, thank you so much again. And they said again, they're like, Scott, you have no idea how helpful it was. And so
Wow.
just don't forget that. Like, it's always a two-way street if you come with the right mindset and a giving, supportive mindset.
Man, this is a great story. Thanks for sharing this. This is great. I mean, we are going to wrap up here, but is that what you would do if you kind of would build this online presence and personal brand from scratch, kind of to also, kind of what would provide, the biggest ROI in your time and money as well? Is that what you would focus on, or would you focus on something, else as well?
So you mean like giving a TEDx talk?
Yeah, for example, in terms of building an online presence and personal brand from scratch.
I think for a personal brand, it's huge because of just the credibility associated with it. Now, there's thousands of talks that get uploaded every day for TEDx. So don't think that you giving a talk means that it's going to get a bunch of views. Again, there's a huge set of things to do before, after, and during to give yourself a better chance. But even if no one actually watches it on YouTube, you have a piece that's high quality, that's with a good brand that you can show people. And it's just a credibility piece. So that's big. It could also really help build, your audience if done in the right way. But what also is really neat about this, and this is a question I will always ask people, if you were asked to give a TED Talk right now, what would you give it on? And that's not an easy thing to answer, because you have to really, know something really well, but also have it really well refined and be able to articulate kind of your life message in 18 minutes or less. And that exercise alone, going through that and the process, makes you become uber refined in how you share your message.
I love that.
And
it's a great challenge. We should challenge the audience here, to leave a comment on, below the video, to kind of post what they're, if they would give a TEDx talk, what would that be about?
Exactly. What would it be about? And then if you actually have to give one, then you have to go through that process. It's almost like a free personal development process of really finding what your thing is. Because, and I mean, to get accepted to give a talk, you have to already have an idea, of course, but to refine it, it's huge. So no matter what actually happens once the talk gets published, the main victory is 90% in the build-up and all that kind of stuff and learning. So yes, I think there's a lot of things you could do. It's hard-pressed for me to think of any other one thing that has the potential as a TEDx talk. Of course there are. I'm just not thinking of them right now. But and I love the TED brand. I'm obsessed with what they're doing. It's amazing what they offer. It's free. It's cool. So anyway,
I think that's a great challenge to end it with, to really, post in the comments here, if you would give a TEDx talk, what would that be about? And if you get accepted, obviously you have to start really practicing hard, like maybe not as rush it as Scott did here, but that's, if you have, that's a great way to get out of the comfort zone. And I mean, I would like to thank you so much, Scott, for sharing kind of, how you live your legend from the ground up, and like how other people also can kind of implement some strategies and tips to kind of build their community around their brand. So thanks so much. And, is liveyourlegend.net the best place to connect with you, or would you like to send people somewhere else?
I think liveyourlegend.net, they'll find everything they need to. And you can find the TEDx if you just search Scott Dinsmore or Find Work You Love. I think that will come up and you can see it. But yeah, the site, actually, when this goes live, I think the new site will be live, so that will be fun.
Very exciting things, man.
And we have a toolkit. Actually, liveyourlegend.net/toolkit has all kinds of really high quality workbooks and things that are totally free to people who join the free community. So anyway, anyone's call, but we just want to help. So however we
Definitely,
can.
man. I'll link all that up under the video here, and feel free to take us up on the challenge as well. That's a really good one. So Scott, thanks so much for coming on the Branding Summit here. I had a really good time.
Oh, Navid, it's an honor. Thanks, man. It's fun.